up on the program. Welcome back, everybody. This is the Caribbean Business Review. My name is Joseph Cox, and today we're looking at this business of sport. And our special guest is Carole Beckford, a sports marketing specialist, as well as some of you may know her better as a former publicist for Usain Bolt. I've known Carole for years, and I know Carole as sports extraordinaire. Let me just put it that way. She's a CEO of her own media company and other things, but I suppose she doesn't like to blow her own trumpet. But I will this time, Carole.
Hey.
Yes, yes, indeed. Thanks so much, my friend, for joining. Now, Carole, as we look at what's happening in the sports, I call it in the business side of sports nowadays. We have a scenario where one, Sports Max is closing down in August. We have situations where you have athlete migration because in some cases, I suppose it's in for more lucrative sponsorship and other opportunities. And there is a general feeling that, well, it's more than a feeling, that some of our sports are not really getting the attention that they should. The emphasis is seemingly always on the usual cricket, to a lesser extent football, and of course sprinting. Not even track and field, but sprinting. How did we get here? And frankly speaking, just lay the foundation for me. What is happening really?
All right. So the Caribbean, thanks as always for chatting with me back in the
Sure.
days from first edition and all those lovely things.
Oh yes.
Sports in the region. We have been going to the Summer Olympic Games since 1948 as non-independent and independent nations collectively. So I think in that context, 80 years of sport from that wider context suggests that this region has been producing talent. Of course, from as way back as the 20s, we have had West Indies cricket, George Headley, Collie Smith and those fellas and so on. And so from that extent, I think the region has continued to produce talent. What has happened over the last 20 years in particular is that the global sport market has just quadrupled, tripled in terms of economic activity. So athletes, the wider base of athletes in whatever sport, have been moving around. This region, however, is still basing a lot of its decision on talent. And the business models that have worked in other global spaces need to be adopted by the region, but can only be facilitated if policymakers are innovative and creative enough to set those up. And so what has happened, we're still very talented, but we're falling behind in the economic models that create the opportunities as much. So in context, we're small enough. I mean, I know I put us under pressure, but we're small.
Yeah.
You're talking about close to 7 million people in English-speaking Caribbean. And from the wider Caribbean to include Domrep and Cuba, it's probably 19, 20 million. That is our state. The US has 300 million when you put
Yes,
that.
indeed.
Right. So in terms of even the opportunity to consume, to purchase, you talk about sports max and so on, to even make it viable is that we are really punching way above our weight class. But the opportunities are there and partnerships are established and so on. So we can talk about policy, we can talk about the actual model, and then we can take it from there.
No, indeed. Well, you see, the thing is simply, as with everything, everything is usually based or grounded in policy. But one of the things that strikes me with what is happening now is that, for example, you're right, sports markets, the business side of sports markets, they have expanded considerably in size. You have persons like yourself, well experienced, can guide and craft processes. But what is the impediment? Why is it that, for example, our private sector has not been able to avail itself of these opportunities? And you still have this kind of, I mean, it would seem to me, and guide me if I'm wrong, but it would seem to me that what I call the athlete migration has increased in recent times.
And let me talk about the private sector. They have invested considerably under the context. I mean, there are brands that have been associated with different kinds of sport over the years.
Yeah, sure.
What hasn't happened, though, is that the policy leaders have not created incentive packages for people to invest more. And in the other jurisdictions that we're competing against,
Hmm.
if I build a stadium for $300 million, there are tax write-offs. Let's go straight to it. I mean, there's no right, and so incentive packages have to be created. So if I spend $100 million on sport for the year, I must be able to get back some kind of incentive, whether it to put back into my development. If I build a venue, the venue must get access to material and resources, whether it's through short-term plans and so on. And so our acts, the Hotel and Tourism Act and all
Right.
those things have a template that we can follow. The innovation that's required to calculate those have not been consistent. And so when certain people leave the scene, it doesn't follow. And there are advocates like myself who, you know how we view advocacy in the region generally. You're either a feminist or a this or a that.
Yeah. They label you. They
Right.
label you to try to diminish you. Yeah, man, of course.
Absolutely. And so the things like art activism and sport activism continue. The only thing that has saved me is that I'm also a practitioner. So I'm a teacher of physical education. I'm a lecturer of sports administration and marketing. I'm an author. I've worked in industries that I've seen on the field, off the field, and I still remain relevant because I collect data. Now, that is a shot. If we don't collect the data, if we don't know how many people are coming into our stadiums, how old they are, how much money they spend, that kind of a thing, we can't convince the IADBs, the CDBs, and the various financial institutions to say, this is what we have, so invest, because this is what you're getting access to. So my current job with the horse racing industry, we have collected that data. And despite wagering, which is seen as a non-conventional activity, we can say betting and gambling, which is the colloquial terms, are not
Right.
ready-made things that people like. But Caymanas Park has created a family-like situation where we can identify who comes there, what their earnings are, what's their connectivity and networking. And so there must be a research, there must be a paper that really guides that. Cricket, football, track and field, basketball, netball, those are the top five sports for the region. And we have to start collecting that data to say this is how it's affected. And then on the social side, how it affects communities and families. So it is a collection of just material that speaks to the reinvestment because 30 years ago, the generation is changing. And I use my son as the example. He's
Mhm.
30. And so the next generation needs to be caught quickly.
Right.
There's no honeymoon period for it. So we have to keep going.
No, I hear you on that, and you're really opening my eyes to some of the things because one of the things that it really jumps out at me now is it that our policymakers, I'm going to go straight to the heart of it, is it that our policymakers do not appreciate the value of sport in terms of in a business, or they just view it as some sort of mechanism where you probably use it to intervene in communities to try and
Yeah.
minimize untoward activity, etc.
Well, it's a mixture of all those things, but I think with people like myself, Howard McIntosh, Michael Hall, Dave Cameron, and some of those people who have really been at it for a very long time are now finally convincing. The Mona School of Business has information to start a research very soon. The PIOJ is going to be reporting sport in a different way. I think by the time Vision 20, the Economic and Social Survey will have sports separate from entertainment. And so we have been advocating for that for the last 18 years. Think about that. And
Wow.
to be honest, the development does grind a little slower in what is the developing nations. And so while I've been attributing a lot of the work that I've done through the policy leaders, I'm also very careful in being patient about how the wheel takes a little longer to grind. So, for example, Carnival, Sumfest, all those things, all those figures are coming through now, and they're seeing. Because think about it, when you make the sacrifice to go to World Cup football, the things you like to do as a sport tourist, and there are categories for that according to the WTO, you spend on food and entertainment because that's what sports lovers like. So we have those figures. A typical sport tourist spends minimum $350 a day for 7 days because you're planning for this now. The World Cup
Yes,
is
of
every four
course.
years, the Olympics
Right.
is every 4 years. And so we tie them. And the other thing that they like is retail. So there are four things that they really spend their money on. So after you pay your airfare and your hotel, is food, entertainment, and retail, because you want to say you were in Paris or in Tokyo. You bring back a shirt, a cup, or that. So we know what they're spending the money on. How do we then collate that to show if you have four of those events in your country now? So that's the other thing, the sport tourism. You have to have something that people want to come to. So it's a mix, but I have a solution is that we have to recreate how we see play, how we see recreation. Physical education must be in schools up to 19. Then we start build out again. And I'm ready for that. I know the population of the communities that have the schools. We have 196 schools, high schools, close to 1,000 primary schools. We know where these children are. Get back PE teachers in schools and can recreate the mindset that if you don't make the team, you can work for the person on the team.
Oh, indeed, indeed.
And even if you're an attorney, whether you're a legal person, financial expert, whether you like journalism, tech, design, you can design clothes and so on. So there's a whole ecosystem. It's just that there's a mindset. People think sports is just run up and down and sweat. No, it's actually it's real work actually.
No, well, one of the things that fascinates me, Carol, is to recognize or to hear you saying that data analytics has been absent from this process. I mean, for how many years we have had going back throughout this region, we have had representatives in all sorts of sports over the years. So therefore, the data would have been ready or should have been readily available for persons to analyze and so on. But I'm just fascinated because at the other side of it, I have to point out to you that, for example, in the last cricket World Cup, you had some countries that opted out completely. I said it was a loss leader for them and they couldn't afford it. You have others who were a little wavering and some pulled out at it, whereas others stayed the course. My query is simply this, that, for example, with the spin-off effects that you have pointed to, $350 a day, you know, I call it minimum for those things. What is the challenge? I don't get it. What is the challenge?
Our
Why
policy
is it not
leaders,
profitable to us?
it's
And
not
when I
about
say us, I mean the collective us.
right. So the policy leaders have been inconsistent. You have a sports committee on CARICOM this year for 5 years and then it disappears. And then they say, oh, it's cricket. And then even in our own country, Jamaica, there is no, because of how the reporting happens. So
Right.
sport is a humanities thing, depends on how they see it. And then it doesn't quite go into, and then by the time you hit Ministry of Finance and they say, where's the data? So you're competing with agriculture, health, and so on. And so even national security, the communities that are more active, the active communities have less social issues and so on because they have something to do. So even that as an experiment. So I mean, listen, those are the things that this region is known for. It's not even about Jamaica anymore. In every Caribbean nation, you can find somebody who is very creative, whether it's an athlete, an artist, or an artist. Somebody like Minchell out of Trinidad that was part of the whole Olympic movement with designs and so on. Trinidad Carnival is now an international product. And so the creatives have to start stepping forward. I mean, and push towards the model. The problem is the banks can't measure a creative output unless you have the numbers to support users, consumers, and value added. And so that is the ongoing process that we have to go through. But the mindset has to change.
No, agreed. But let me ask you, in terms of, because I'm a cricket fan,
Mhm.
despite West Indies' very inconsistent performance, I remain a fan. One of the things that I don't agree with, and you can call me a purist all you wish, and I love your views on this, is this concept of the mound being brought there. Yes, I understand the commercial value that you bring to the space where, you have all sorts of, how should I put it? of entertainment. You have varied entertainment, and there are opportunities, obviously, for it. But for some of us, it might detract from it. Is that part of the debate in terms of how we move forward with the business of sport, where you're looking at some of the traditional approaches versus the more modern dynamics that would be at play?
It's not even about modern. I think consumerism is dictating how we push. So if you look at the NBA, when you go to the matches now, I mean, first of all, they have screens everywhere. So you can't miss the game. So that's the first thing. It's in the bathroom, it's at the concession stands, it's everything. But there's also a game, there's also a basketball offshoot. So you can be shooting on a hoop, you hit the target. Because when I go as a fan and I carry my son, my nephew, my niece, they're
Mm-hmm.
not sitting down for 3 hours to watch a basketball game because their attention span has been limited significantly.
Yeah.
And so they join in. So YouTube, for example, the snippets is the last 2 minutes because, to be honest, you really want to get there. But because we are fans and we were brought into the traditional way, we want to see how the game develop, how you swing from a 20 points down to come back to win a match by 2 points in the last 30 seconds of the game.
Right.
But so big screens are now small screens. You're not going to sit down and watch your phone for 3 hours. So you go on YouTube and you get the highlights for the last 120 seconds. And so with the attention span of consumers being limited, we have to be innovative. Similarly, in the policies section, you have to devise innovative and creative ways to attract support and investment into this traditional product, which now has non-traditional outputs. You know, the highlights, the games. I mean, when you go to the Miami Heat Stadium, there's a shirt under your seat because when you're playing certain matches, it's white hot heat kind of a thing. So fan engagement is massive. And you have to know what the fans want. And if you want the families to come 0 to 100, grandpa will sit down upstairs and watch the match. And watch the warm up and watch the match. And he will sit after to watch the cool down. The children are not watching. And the ladies are out shopping for things. So you have to satisfy that family unit that you want engaged. And so those are some things. But when we sit in the policy house, we have to determine how we incentivize a private sector, whether it's a beverage brand, a liquor brand, or food manufacturing, and those are the people. Watches, what are the things the fans do when they come to the games, kind of a thing. And so you have to create that. And so the conversation is ongoing. It's a dynamic process. Every year it changes. And think about the support for even NBA, NFL. When one of your top player leaves one team to go to the other, how then do you engage to have fans watch? When LeBron left Cleveland, Cleveland went from having 36 national games to 2 national games on TV.
Mhm.
How then do I consume my Cleveland game, knowing very well I can still make the Eastern Conference final? With West Indies not doing so well, that's the problem. So people are not going out to watch a team make 27 in a test,
Well, I still can't get over it.
right? And so what do? I remember going to Antigua one year and it rained, like rain. No match
Yes.
couldn't play. But then there was Chicky, the DJ, who played music and we had fun in the stadium.
Mhm.
And so it is that kind of dynamic thing that works in a sports venue that really
Yeah, but
creates.
yeah, but you see, Carol, the thing is in place because in the early years of cricket, I mean, we used to go there all the while and watch matches. And a fixture and everything was gravy. You understand? And for people who don't appreciate this, sometimes, cricket can be long and sometimes boring in certain respects. But the fact of life is that you have more entertainment in this region, right? You have more entertainment in the stands than, frankly speaking, sometimes that's on the field. And so it's a part of that whole experience. So, in other words, if we can package this region for tourism, why are we reticent or unable to package it effectively for sports? Because I say it's not just cricket. You have cricket, football, you have tennis, you have hockey, even though I know you don't mention it as one of the top five, but it's still one of my favorites, etc.
Mhm.
What is the impediment? Why we not be able to do it?
And I don't understand it, because we have all the data, we have access to what? I don't know what the number is now, but I've done 4.5 million people within a 4 hour flight time to the general Caribbean.
Mhm.
Right? Clearly, Jamaica is easier to get to than a lot of other places. So we are the second stop out of every major city, or sometimes a direct spot. You can fly straight from London. I mean, Montego Bay is like the hub. Some of the other regions are catching up, but you have to either come to Miami or Jamaica to get there. So in terms of travel, and one of the other things as sports fans, you don't want to be hopping on a flight on 3 or 4 different flights. And we have the
Mhm.
numbers to show. So the packaging and the experience. The other thing is we haven't done a good enough job of telling people that we have running water, light, and we drive car in the Caribbean. There's still some places,
You mean some of them still believe that we live in huts and swing on vines or sort of nonsense?
and when they come and they realize that our communities are more modern than some of the places that they are, they're like shocked. So we haven't made that. So then, and so it starts to offer competition in the region. So Trinidad has its own thing out there. So does Jamaica and Barbados, right? And then the rest of us. So the policy has to speak to the amalgamation of thoughts and ideas, the consolidation of
Right.
spirit. And I mean, it sounds emotional, but it shouldn't be. But then run the figures alongside that. All right. So nobody can say, ask the ridiculous questions. Where in Jamaica is whatever. No, no, no. We're all different nations. We're collectively. Just like some of the other places, they're a collection of islands and territories in one place called Australia, in one place called New Zealand.
Mhm.
And there are a collection of jurisdictions in one place
Right.
called the West Indies or the Caribbean,
Right.
which
Right.
includes Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, St. Lucia, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Etc.
So I think going forward, the policy leaders have to determine what are the 5 things that turn their economic cycle. I mean, the National Industrial Policy of Jamaica speaks to that. In 1996, we came up with this thing. It was bauxite, it was mining, it was food, and so on. It's interchangeable, and I could hazard a guess as to what are the 5 industries now that turn economic thing. Sport and entertainment, call it whatever, creative industries is one of them. It's agriculture, and it makes a healthy nation. So if your children are moving
Right.
and they're doing the right thing, so it's a mindset, and I think we owe it to ourselves because we're now grandparents' age, and our children will have either started or are having children,
Yeah.
and the next generation deserves an opportunity to participate and to have access, and
No,
they
I
can.
agree. Agreed. Agreed. But
Yeah.
but it strikes me equally that, for example, why hasn't our region responded to things like, I call it the phenomenon of Usain Bolt? You have, I mean, if there is one person who you can identify as being basically an icon in terms of how you can drive sports investment, it would be Usain Bolt, right? So he had his team. You guys obviously did well on his behalf, etc., etc., right? But why? What is it we're waiting on as a region? And why do we? Because, for example, when you have people pick up themselves and go into all these sometimes very distant lands for additional training, for the, as I say, sports, for sponsorship opportunities, etc., etc. What is it that the people are there seeing but we in this region are not? I mean, I look at young Miss Alfred in St. Lucia. When she won, she got almost something akin to a national hero's welcome at home. And I had to commend it at one point to say, my God, I wonder if they're overdoing it and therefore putting too much pressure on the girl, when she goes on. But, history prove one way or the other. But my thing is simply this: what is it they are seeing, but we are so blinded to?
I don't think we're blind. I think we've gotten comfortable. St. Lucia is coming into its own. And by the way, Miss Alfred looks in fine form and possibly could take the double in Tokyo. I mean, I saw her at the London Diamond League, and that 22.84 looks extremely comfortable. That's a whole other story. Track and field needs to find its own model. I think World Athletics needs to really look at how it handles media rights and how it pays its athletes and offer incentives, because track and field is not among the most watched sport. It's only watched heavily during the Olympics. So that's another story that I can explain to you. But the focus must be on cricket. Well, football is the most popular sport in the world, then cricket. And then in terms of what the region is for women is netball and even basketball. Um, our value added to hockey is that we have officials. So we send our officials to the international bodies. It's funny, we taught Cuba how to play hockey and we can't even beat them under 19 team now. So again, it is how we do physical education in schools. What are the sports? And not every country, not every school in the country has to play the same sports all the time. The curriculum of the PE can look at certain things. But if I live up in an area that if one footballer from my area will probably make it, why not do hockey? Why not play lacrosse? We're getting lacrosse scholarships now, And we play. Yes, we had somebody on. As a matter of fact, I don't want to make any mistake. Cornell and a team from Maryland was in the finals, and there were two Jamaicans represented in the NCAA lacrosse championships. They got scholarships. I think one is a KC boy. So yes, so we're doing and the other question is, are we playing too many sports? But that's the opportunity. If your child can get a scholarship to go to college and they play croquet,
Yeah.
bocce,
Yeah.
and whatever, take the scholarship and go. And then use that as a stepping stone. And so here we are again, the mindset has to change. Sport is an active form of education that can get you into
Yeah.
doors, but it is also something that keeps you healthy if you practice play and recreation. So I think that's the concept that we have to start redeveloping for the next generation. And I think over the next 30 years, if some of us live that long, we can actually see it being rolled out into a real. In the meantime, though, use the resources, combine the likes of Chris Gale, Machelle, Usain, Shelley, Julian, and really put together a story that sells the Caribbean as a place where stars are born, stars are made, and stars reform their communities. And I think it's something that we can look at.
Yeah. Well, Carol, listen, we run out of time, but I suppose the last question I really want to say is how can we at least start to see a transition to the kind of active merchandising that you would see, for example, in the States and other markets? I mean, where are the little bubble dolls? Where are the T-shirts? If it's even a T-shirt to highlight some of the sports and the events or the successful athletes in them. What's the problem?
There's some things we have to figure out in the region. Our overheads and shipping logistics are considerably higher than the standard. And unless we form relationships that we can get stuff into the island at reasonable cost, then it's going to be a problem. I mean, when you can get a brand that you support, an international brand, for $25, but when you look on the shirt for your own nation, it's costing $40.
Yeah.
You're going to buy the Liverpool shirt, you're going to buy the Chelsea shirt,
Yeah.
and so on. So it has become, so that's part of the economic rollout that has to show the value from one part of the chain up to the next. So if you encourage the play into active competition into the business does include retail merchandise, that kind of a thing. And so
Yeah.
somebody has to talk it through.
Yeah. All right, Carole Beckford, that's where we have to leave it for today. My thanks to you. It's Carole Beckford, sports marketing specialist and good friend of many years. Look forward to our next conversation, Carole, because we have to keep on this issue of, because there's so much money to be made in sports,
A
so
lot.
much.
A lot.
And I just find it to be almost a shame that we've not, as a region, we're not capitalizing on it. We're capitalizing on everything else, but not that.
All right. Time is now.
All right. Indeed, the time is now, my friend. Thanks so much.
No
All
problem.
right.
Take care.
Good, good.